All right, Wolfpack Nation, we are back here for part 2, baby. If you have not checked out part 1 yet, make sure to pause it right now. Go back, watch part 1 first, and then jump right back in here. So again, you will not want to miss out on part 1 if you have not seen that already. Trust me, take my word for it. But with that being said, again, we are talking about, talking a little bit here about Clemson. Going to start talking a little bit more about FSU, the game coming up here. But there are a couple more points that we need to touch on, which definitely, are points of topic we need to discuss. But just as a reminder as well, we have Kenton Gibbs here from the Lockdown Wolfpack podcast. Riley Williams here with Inside Pack Sports, again, doing a roundtable, just kind of trying to just talk about where we are. Obviously, a huge game just occurred. Unfortunately, lost 30-20 to Clemson, but kind of picking up where we left off. So I think we all can say that if there was a guy that has been the biggest surprise for NC State so far this season, Demi Sumo would be probably right up on that list, if not by himself, and it's not even close. That guy has been super impressive for being as young as he is, for sure. And, to really be able to be a guy that so far, before Clemson, was able to split carries with Jordan Houston and be effective, was a great thing to have, because I think that was one of our biggest questions is, can Houston be that 3-down workhorse back? Or if not, who can be a guy that can jump in and be effective, to split with him. And Demi's been that guy. But yesterday, 5 carries for 10 yards. First of all, and then Jordan Houston, 7 carries for 32 yards. So a combined 34 yards rushing for the game yesterday. So I want to kind of ask you, Ryan, I know, from the offensive side that you definitely take a lot of focus, but what would you say the reasoning is that between Jordan Houston and Demi Sumo, we only had 12 carries? Was it a matter of that we saw early that it wasn't working, so we were just going to put it in Devin Lear's hands? Or, what would you kind of say to that?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, the difference between Houston and Sumo in this game, because I felt like Houston really hit the hole hard when it was there. It seemed like he could make, something out of nothing. Whereas Sumo, he's good at letting the holes fill up, but they never came. It was kind of odd we went away from the running game, because I felt we got, some good 4 or 5 runs here and there. We got our normal stuff. But I would have liked to see it just a little bit more from the run game, because I thought Houston was effective the few times that he did run. And the biggest thing for me is, like, when you run, it opens up your play action game, right? So we had a play action pass early in the game that kind of rolled out and hit Thayer wide open for like a 20-something yard gain. Mm-hmm. And running the ball allows you to do that. Well, when we went away from that, we just went into an all-pass offense, and it kind of became obvious what we're doing. So it took the play action out of our choices of plays. Yeah. So I would have liked to see us stick with it a little bit more. I like what I saw from Houston. Sumo, I think he was just a little bit timid, which is okay. It was Clemson, but I think they're still going to have a big season coming up, and against Florida State too.
And Ken, one thing which I want to get you to touch on, since you're a former defensive lineman, is that for me, I felt like one of the biggest things for this game was our offensive line. Really, it seemed to be struggled. Anthony Bell, and I think this was by far, not even close, his worst game for sure. I know it's obviously a tough point because he was facing, a really tough and really elite defensive line for sure. But it just seemed like, passing wise, we weren't able to really cover that well. Even on basic defensive line schemes, it seemed like that defensive tackle, when the defensive end would pin the guard's hip, the defensive tackle came right around, a lot of times was not even touched. And then from the run side, it just seemed like for what kind of Ryan was saying, that the offensive line just could never get to the second level. They were just not able to make the holes. And then once they were able to make the holes, they couldn't get to that linebacker or get to that safety to really just open up the floodgates for Demi or Jordan Houston to run down. What were your kind of thoughts, obviously touch on the running back, but even offensive line as well?
Number one, I think Demi Sumo was a little bit more banged up than they let on. He looked tight. He looked stiff all night. He didn't look like and it could potentially be that, the wear and tear of his running style is starting to catch up to him. I would hope not this early in the season. That would be the hope and prayer there. But he looked a little banged up. But now, talking about the offensive line, Belton, congratulations. Me and you have something in common. The worst game of our lives were both against Clemson. Throw it away, prepare for the next one. Throw it away, prepare for the next one. This offensive line got beat like they stole something in that second half. The first half, they held up extremely well. The first half, the protection was there, but it wasn't just about them. And this is why, again, going back to last episode, I'm not mad at people calling for Beck's head, because when you put them in a position to succeed, when you kept your backs in the backfield to help block, when you kept those tight ends in the block, good things happen. You don't need 5 guys running a route to catch the ball to get somebody open. I promise you, it's in the rule book. You can have a 1-man route. It's legal. It's legal. It's a legal thing. And also, another thing about our run game that back to back, too predictable. We cannot run the ball every first down for the first 2.5 to 3 quarters and expect for the defense not to catch on. If I'm the defensive coordinator playing against NC State, well, let's look at how often they run the ball on first down here. Okay. Hey guys, don't worry about rushing the passer on first down. Yep, we definitely need to they run a heavy zone scheme. So 3 technique, you probably need to be the reach. Backside nose guard, you're probably gonna need to be the power scrape. In just cue the hip, we'll be all right. Linebackers, be ready to fill a hole on first down. I guarantee you it'll work out for the first 8 or 9 first downs of the game. How about it? Let's go for it, boys. And it worked. Again, to me, the players did not play their best. Absolutely. Absolutely. There were plenty of times where a play that should have been made or the coaches put them in position and they just did not do what they were coached to do. Sure. But also offensively, I don't think that there was a lot of putting them in positions to succeed. I didn't see a lot of passes where I look at Devin Leary and I say, what was that? I didn't see a lot of drops. I didn't see a lot of things where I'm like, again, Belton, he was getting whooped on. And to me, when a tackle is getting whooped on, if I'm an offensive coordinator and you tell me which position do I got to pick to get beat up on like that, I'm going to pick the tackle every time. You know why? Because it's easier to chip. It's easier to send help. If you got a guy in the middle getting beat like that, ooh, hold on now. That's a different ball game. But if you got a guy on the edge, hey, tight end, we're gonna send you in motion, just give him a little pop on your way out, and then run a little drag or whatever. Or just stay in. Make sure, Belton, protect your inside. He cannot beat you around the edge. He cannot do it. Bada bing, bada boom. Again, I would not be as upset about how the offense performed if we did not follow the winning recipe and it did not have success in the game. But we did. We did the thing. We did the thing that was supposed to be done. And so I would very strongly urge for this team going forward to look at the 2002 NC State team and look at what happened with them in terms of they let 1 loss turn into 2, turn into 3. And that is what you don't want to do here. There's everything that you want is still in front of you. You're going to need help for some of it. I believe that there's just enough smart people in the ACC that somebody is actually going to follow that winning recipe, and Clemson may be having an off day, and they're going to go ahead and steal a win. You have got to capitalize on that just in case 2 teams are crazy enough to say, hey, let's test those corners all game. Just in case, you've got to take care of business and look forward to going 1-0 this week. Last week is last week. Death Valley was Death Valley. Throw it out the window. Ball it up. If you won, what would you do? You would celebrate for 24 hours, ball it up, throw it away. If you lose, you've got to be the same guy. Ball this performance up, throw it away, look forward to the nose.
Yep, absolutely. I love it. And again, I think that, you kind of led in perfectly, talking about, Florida State here. And because one of the things which I know from, one of my, obviously Macon Adams, one of the co-hosts of Tuffy Talk, one of the stats he always loves talking about is how it is a legitimate stat that the game after you play Clemson, that you have over, at least statistically, over a 90% likelihood of losing the next game, just because of the fact that if you lose, it's a demoralizing loss, because more likely you get beat. But also too, if you lose even closely, then it's like you put all you have into that game, but you weren't able to pull it out. And so then it's kind of a factor of, well, can we even do it at all kind of deal. And so I think that just like you said, at the end of the day, you cannot let this game beat you twice. You cannot do it. And I think honestly, if we were able to do that, because again, this ain't no Joe Schmo either game. This is Florida State that just got, again, I think it's another game where the score did not really show how lopsided the game was. I mean, Wake Forest just had it and really just took it to Florida State. So Florida State's going to be coming into Carter Finley to really be making a statement and get their season back on the right train as well. So one thing which I wanted to kind of talk about here, because something which was a worry, is that late in the game you can almost argue in garbage time, Derek Pitts gets called for a targeting, which is 100% a targeting, and so which means he's going to be out for the first half. Coming up here against Florida State, but also too as well. Obviously, the news, and again, we don't know necessarily yet as of this recording what is going on with Cyrus Fagan. But I mean, I know he went to the locker room early, and he never came back, and he was ruled out for the rest of the game. So to me, I think obviously Jakeem Harris, you got to step right in, a guy that has a lot of experience. And you got to step in again. It's got to be a next man up approach. At the end of the day, injuries are going to happen. It's football. It's not soccer. It's not it is full out contact. So injuries are more likely going to happen. At the end of the day, I think that with the history that we have, the fact that we have been again, knocking on wood here, as healthy as we have been up until this point, is a great thing to see. To have Peyton Wilson, who's been available, for 4 games this season is incredible. It's a great thing. Again, that will help us out a lot. But I do want to kind of ask, obviously Ryan, in terms of Jakeem Harris talking about Cyrus Fagan, talking about Derek Pitts being out for the first half. Do you feel like that kind of changes things at all in terms of your confidence of this defense heading into this Florida State game against Jordan Travis?
I think it's going to be about how State manages the game. I think it's going to be also if we can get Tyler Baker Williams back. Yeah. I know Fagan went out with a back injury, so I don't know the severity of it yet. Mm-hmm. I think our back end is okay, but it's like if they're going to be out there all game, against an athletic Florida State team, which can be also very physical too, because they have 2-3 really good running backs. Mm-hmm. I mean, it could be an issue, but I think Jakeem and Boykin, they're both, solid guys. I think they're well prepared, and I think they will be okay in that role. And then on the outside, you have White, and you're going to have Battle, who's a big physical corner to match up well with Wilson. They're big 6'7", 230 receiver that they have out there. Yeah. I think they're going to be okay. There's a lot of experience still in that backcourt or in that backfield. So, I mean, I think we'll be fine depending on how the game is managed on our end.
Yeah. And because, too, Michael, I want to kind of ask you, too. So kind of looking at it, too, because, looking at the stats here from the Florida State Wake Forest game. Jordan Travis was 23 of 35 for 281 yards and 3 touchdowns. No interceptions. And also, too, Jordan Travis also ran 6 times for 2 yards. So, and especially with a guy who's a dual threat like Jordan Travis and the guy who is explosive like he is, running the ball even as well. Ryan kind of alluded to, how Florida State has a couple of really good running backs. But you could argue that Jordan Travis is the best thrower and even probably the best runner as well. So would you say that one of the reasons why Florida State was able to only score 7 points in the first 3 quarters just has to do a lot with not be, the ability to not finish drives? Because, even, too, looking at turnovers, they only turned the ball over once. So it's just a matter of really just that they were able to move, but just not enough. That's what these stats here kind of scream out to me.
Yeah, and Jordan Travis has definitely improved from last year.
Easily.
He is a true dual threat quarterback this year. But I think I still have confidence in our linebackers to contain him from a QB spy perspective. I mean, really any of the 3 of them could do it. But yeah, I think the biggest thing that is concerning with him and going against our secondary is more so the depth now that we're down a couple players. Like I have no doubt in their ability of Jakeem Harris and Devin Boykin, but injuries, we said it, injuries happen. And if one of them goes down, then you're starting to get real thin back there. So that would be my biggest concern coming up against
Yeah.
Florida State.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ken too, in terms of looking at that game, does anything else really scream out to you when you took a look back at that game in terms of why it seemed that Florida State was able to struggle as much as they did against Wake Forest early in that game?
Yeah, Wake Forest had they had what I like to call bend but don't break defense. It counts on you getting timely stops. It counts on they're going to hit some plays here and there.
Yep.
You're fine with that. It happens. Your goal is when the going gets tough and you have to bow your neck, you can find a way to do so, which they did, which I think is very surprising given this Wake Forest defense and not only the talent but the scheme. I think that is a defense that keeps things very vanilla on purpose because they don't have the horses in the stable to run with almost any team in this conference. So, that's just the reality there. But the fact that they were able to get the timely stops that they did against Florida State, I mean, it's one of those things where you just kind of look up and say, wow, that's a little bit shocking. But at the end of the day, I know that coming out of this game, Florida State's going to look at what they did on third downs against Wake Forest. They're going to look at what they did in terms of why were we not able to convert at a higher level when we were in good positions? That's going to be the question. And the answers are going to come out in the wash this weekend. There's going to be a time where this game is, in essence, going to come down to who has cleaned up their mistakes more effectively. Because honestly and truly, both of these teams and the mistakes that we've seen have been running patterns with them, not just from earlier this year, for years with an S. Yeah. We have seen Florida State put on tape looking really great at times, and then in moments where we need them most, they're like the Avatar. They just disappear on you. So there's that. And then when you look at NC State, you look at a team that defensively, the question is going to be, because honestly, as good as Florida State's running game is, I think we got one of the best rushing defenses in the country. And with that being said, we showed it against Shipley and Pace and Company. And so with that being said, the question is going to be, are we going to be the same old person in terms of that big 6'6", 235 guy is going to dunk on everybody who comes his way, or are we going to show that we're new and improved and we are doing what we need to do to clean up the error so that, again, we don't let one loss turn into two, turn into three, because we're not cleaning up mistakes that we already have shown on tape.
Yeah. Before we continue, I want to take a quick second to tell you about our sponsor, Flatlands Jessup Insurance Group, that has your whole world covered, with agents in 5 offices throughout eastern North Carolina to help you decide how much coverage you need. Offering policies for home and auto, recreational vehicles, commercial, crop, health, life, and employee benefits. They are able to combine options to find a comprehensive solution that works for you. Flatlands Jessup protects the things you love so you can spend less time worrying and more time enjoying them. Find them on Facebook and Instagram at Flatlands Jessup. You can also visit their webpage at www.flatlandsjessup.com. So please make sure to go and check them out. Well, hey, Ryan, I want to kind of transition it kind of perfectly into, another thing that really stood out to me was that Wake Forest, at least up until this point, obviously losing their running back to as a transfer to South Carolina, really up until this point has not really been able to run the ball very effectively, at least against, solid competition, but Justice Ellison ran for 114 yards, averaged over 6 yards a carry, and a touchdown against FSU. So would you say going into this game that, just from that stat, alone, that maybe our running game, you really have to look at them, that we need a bounce back from guys like Demi and Jordan Houston this week?
Yeah, and I think a lot that played into the ability to run on Florida State was they were missing their best defensive lineman. He was out for that game, and I know their offensive lineman, their best offensive lineman, was out too. So I'm not sure about what his availability is going to be on Saturday, but it's one of those things where if you can run the ball, you can control the game, right? And it kind of goes back to my previous point about where you can control the game. You can keep your defense off the field. You can keep that short secondary or that shallow secondary. You can keep them kind of fresh, right? Yep. So, we say at every game, we need to be able to run the ball, because when we, rely on the pass, sometimes it's not always there. So it's one of those where you really need the run game to supplement your offense. And if a team like Florida State is giving that up, granted, the mesh offense, it makes me so mad to watch because it's effective.
Yeah.
So I think that also speaks on Florida State is still kind of undisciplined. So it's one of those things where State's offense can take advantage of that. And I hope they do, because we were talking about in the previous episode about scheming against those weaknesses. So I'm hoping that, against Florida State, we can come up with these packages, these plays, and being able to run the ball is going to open up the play action. And it looks like you can take advantage of that on Florida State because they can get out of position pretty easy. And, I think they were kind of set on stopping the pass. So they gave up runs here and there. And it's just one of those things where State's it'd be nice to establish a run game for once.
And Ken, I want to ask you this even too, because one thing which did not touch on, and I'm not necessarily calling this out either, but it just makes me wonder, and I want to ask you, being a former player, if there's anything more to this. But to me, I was honestly the thing that actually shocked me the most of anything else about the game. And again, and that's a big comment to say, because we already talked about how we rushed 3 way more than I said we should at all, which was 0. But Grant Gibson seemed to, man, he was off. Like there was 3 false starts, if I'm not mistaken, that were his fault, basically snap infractions. And one was in the most important time, being on a 4th down play where you just snapped it early and Devin wasn't ready for it, hit him right in the belly, and it fell on the ground. So I just wanted to ask you, not spend too much time on this, because again, I'm not calling him out, but just it concerns me, being a senior and being that he's, one of the leaders of our team, that in one of the biggest moments in our biggest game of the season, he just wasn't ready.
It is.
I mean, go ahead.
I think it's a truly unfortunate situation.
Okay.
But there is some context and history between him and Clemson, which if you watch the broadcast, they talked about his grandparents being the first 2 black students ever at Clemson and all that. And you can only imagine the emotions that come from there. But here's the fun thing about that. What happens between the lines don't care about your emotions. They don't care about the historical context and relevance of a thing to you. It does not matter. And the reality is, you expect that out of a young guy. You expect the moment and all of those things to be too big, and you expect that out of a senior that's been in this program for forever and a day. It feels like a moment where you have to hunker down and say, yes, it is this university, this moment means a lot to my family and all that. What would mean more is a win. So let me execute. Let me shut out the noise. I don't care how many people are there screaming. I don't care who went there, who graduated from there, who did or who didn't. Guess what? Not a single one of them is on that field with you. Shut out the noise. Do your job. And that is what I mean by this. Again, when you consider the context of how we played, it is a bad loss to me, because I'm okay with you getting beat by a better team. I will never say, hey, this is the worst thing in the world and this is just a horrible thing that there's another team in the world better than us. Not at all. The way that Cincinnati lost to Alabama in the playoffs last year, Cincinnati did everything they could. Everybody was where they were supposed to be. They were fitting the gaps. It's just a bigger, stronger, faster, better team beats you, and you live with that. But I don't accept a 5th-year senior having 3 snap infractions and a fumbled snap on 4th down. I refuse to live with that. I refuse to live with that. Not just any 5th-year senior, a guy who's been all conference, a guy who's been all American, all world, all whatever you could name it. He's been all the things. Mm-hmm. In these moments, you've got to be all the things. You've got to be all the things. To me, you don't prove that you're an All-American against Charleston Southern. You don't prove that you're an All-American against ECU. You prove it here. You prove it in this moment. But luckily, like we've already talked about and like we're going to continue to talk about here, there's more football left to play. And guess what? Florida State's bringing in some pretty good defensive linemen too. So you're going to have another chance. And guess what? After that, you're going to play some more good teams. And guess what? You might even play a Syracuse team that's a 1-loss or undefeated right after that. So the reality is this performance was disappointing for a lot of folks, including Grant Gibson. But
Yep.
The reality is, if these players want this season to be what everybody talked about at the beginning of the year, then they have to have a deep look in the mirror and say, it's time. It's from not we have to be mistake free from this point forward. We have to go out and show and prove everything that everybody believed in us. To begin this season, we got to go show and prove it.
Yep. And to kind of wrap this episode up here, I do want to ask kind of Ryan one final question, which is that at the beginning of the season, obviously watching the All Access documentary, everybody talked about ACC championship, ACC championship, ACC championship or bust, and obviously now you're in a position where more than likely that opportunity is not going to come. But that does not mean by any stretch of the measure that you pack it up and it's over with. That you're disappointed if you don't win it all. At the end of the day, we still have an opportunity here to realistically go 11-1, and then Clemson could potentially make the college ball playoff, which means we'd be right there for a really good shot at a New Year's Six bowl. And at the end of the day, if we're 11-1 with the opportunity to go to New Year's Six bowl, I don't think anybody's really going to be too upset here. So, but I do want to ask you though, do you feel that what you've seen up until this point, would you say that it has affected what you expect the ceiling to be for the season from what you thought it was preseason? AKA, from what you've seen during these 5 games, do you think that now maybe you're kind of backing off the ceiling a little bit?
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, obviously the offense is underperformed. Defense has been great, is what we've been expecting. Offense is underperformed, so it's going to be a matter of we get that turned around. But I also think it's everything around in the Atlantic now, because everyone thought Florida State wouldn't be that good, and now they have the potential to be very good. As Kenton mentioned, you could be going against an undefeated Syracuse team at Syracuse, and then I think we have Virginia Tech after that, and then you're going to play Wake Forest. So I have faith in the team. I think the Clemson game was a back to reality kind of moment. I remember talking in one of our preseason shows, mentioning where it was like I didn't want the season to start because everything was so great. There was so much excitement, so much hype, and then it was almost like the Clemson game was like a back to reality kind of moment. But and also talking about what Kenton said, it's like you don't want. There's always that chance of 1 loss turning 2 losses, turning into 3 losses, and then it just gets out of control. So it's really going to come back to, is this family, as Dora mentions, they're a family. Are they as tight and, as they say, and are they going to come back together and use this to carry them throughout the season? Because there's still a lot, at risk here. And I mean, you never know what could happen. Clemson losing 1 or 2 games. They've shown that they're beatable. I think they played an excellent game against us. But that doesn't mean that we can't play excellent. And, it could always light the fire under this team.
Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot to play for.
Amen. Absolutely. Ken, I just want to kind of, just because this is really the biggest question, because obviously a lot of people are saying, well, we may not win more than 8 or 9 games, per se, but I still go back to, at the end of the day, the 2 of the toughest games which you see for the rest of the season, Florida State and Wake Forest. But I mean, Syracuse is up there for sure. UNC is going to be challenged, but at the end of the day, I'm still circling Florida State and Wake Forest, that they're both at home, which is a huge benefactor, especially since we've played so well at home. You don't have to go, to Doak Campbell Stadium and FSU. You don't have to go to the place that just seems to have, the magic secret dust on us, at Wake Forest. You're playing them both at home in your own house. So, I mean, kind of moving off that, kind of asking the same question, Ken, do you kind of move your needle at all for this ceiling for this team this year?
Absolutely. Coming into this season, I'll say this. Let's imagine a world for a second. Let's imagine a world, because, we talked about back to reality, but let's go back to imagination land for just a second here. Imagine a world where we get the same Devin Leary that we get from last year, and the offensive line holds up against Clemson, and our defense doesn't kind of piss down their leg to start the game and give DJ confidence. Imagine that world, right? That's a very different world than the one we live in right now, right? But that world was a world that was very possible to exist. That wasn't a situation where Dr. Strange was going to have to run through a million simulations to find one. I'm sure there were plenty where that happened. However, in the world that we live in, it didn't happen. So now you ask me, do my expectations for the season change? Absolutely. when people would ask me during the offseason, can this NC State team make the playoff? I would say absolutely, because this is a team that is a Power 5 team that could go undefeated. So that is absolutely a possibility. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Now, with that being said, is there a chance to make the playoff now? I would say absolutely not, because, I mean, of course, if you get into the ACC championship, the only way to do so is if Clemson loses multiple games, okay? So now your one loss is to a team that's lost 2 to 3 games. No. So, yes, the expectations are dampened. However, fans, let me talk to you for a second, Wolfpack Nation. Relax. Calm down. Y'all are making me quote a Packer. I'm a Lions fan. I hate you all for making me do that. I'm joking. I love you, Wolfpack Nation. But please don't make me quote Aaron Rodgers again. Relax, guys. Relax, gals. Relax, adults, children, teenagers, all the same. Relax. Let me explain to you why. This thought of like, oh, this team's ceiling is now 9 or however many games. Well, I'm sorry, but what NC State team are you looking at here? Because the reality of what you're talking about, if you say that NC State's ceiling is only 8 or 9 games, then what you're saying here is that I don't believe that they're going to get 5 wins for the rest of the season. Which, hey, you can feel like that, sure. But where do the losses come from? And again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this NC State team is unbeatable, because we just saw they're in fact very beatable. Where are you getting this world where they're losing to a handful of these teams? Yes, you all are right. Florida State has been a surprise. I would argue the Atlantic has been surprisingly bad overall. Boston College is an absolute train wreck, and the Fighting Scott Satterfields just lost to them. Syracuse, we all know, although they may be undefeated, they're not that good. Barely scraping by some of the teams that they've barely scraped by so far this season. Sean Tucker off to a very rough start when we all know he's the lifeblood of that team. But now the question is not about everybody else. It's never going to be about everybody else. We're now good enough to where it's not about everybody. Again, when I played for NC State, it was not about everybody. I mean, it was not about us. It was definitely about everybody else. It was about Jameis and them were too good. That is a team that we could not do anything with. It was about Deshaun and company. We're too good. Let's go ahead and pack it up. It doesn't even make much sense to drop. But now this team does not have to worry about who's good or bad in the conference. This team has to worry about how are we doing what we're doing. This team has to worry about how am I being my best as a coordinator? Am I calling a predictable play call sequence? Am I calling prevent defense at the end of a half? Am I doing what I need to do as a senior leader in terms of not having snap infractions? Am I doing what I need to do in terms of being a senior and not having drops and creating separation? Am I doing whatever your position is, whoever you are on this team? It's not about the external stuff, because everybody likes to say, oh, it's never about them. Listen, when you have no talent, it's definitely about them. It's about them, okay? Don't let anybody lie to you and say it's not about them. When you got Lamar Jackson walking through that door and you don't have anybody who can keep up with him, it's about them. It's kind of about them a little bit. But this team, it's about us. It's about what does this team want to be. 8 or 9 games, again, if this team only wins 8 or 9 games, multiple heads should roll. Multiple folks should be getting their exiting papers. Hey, it was a great season. Go wherever you want in the world. We're going to give you a little severance package here. We're going to give you a little replica NC State helmet as well to take with you. But you ain't allowed back in Raleigh, okay? Your fob no longer works at the facility. Turn it into Mama D. All right. See you later.
Yeah.
That's what needs to happen if this team can only muster up 8 games with what's left on the schedule.
I agree. I 100% agree. At the end of the day, it's again, knock on wood, up until this point, there has not been anybody knocked out for the season. So at the end of the day, you still have most all your guys at your disposal. You have Trent Penix coming back, any day now, whether it's this week or next week, whatever it is, you have him come back, which is huge. So yeah, no, at the end of the day, and let's not even say either, that it's not like that. We've obviously talked a lot about the negative from the Clemson game yesterday, but there were some positive. It was great to see Leary start to be a little bit leery in the big situations. Overall, he was making good decisions. He was making good throws, overall. A little bit here and there he was off, but it's not like he was terrible. At the end of the day, he was definitely he was very usable yesterday. There's no doubt about it. So, with that being said, again, obviously, 8 o'clock on AC Network in Carter Finley, night game, sold out against Florida State. If you are not going already, make sure to do so. Just because it's sold out does not mean that tickets are available. Just look on your third party ticket websites, and if you haven't, if you're not already going, go take a look. We need everybody there. We need every seat filled and supporting this team 100%. It is a huge game, and just because Florida State is not ranked anymore does not mean it's not a big game. It is a huge game, a huge opportunity against a good team that's looking to prove itself and get back in the right position here for this season. So with that being said, again, I want to say, first of all, a huge thank you to Ryan and Kenton here for joining us. Obviously, Kenton Gibbs with the Lockdown Wolfpack. Make sure to check him out on Twitter for on the Lockdown Wolfpack podcast Twitter page. And then obviously too, make sure to check them out on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, you name it. Ryan, obviously with Inside Pack Sports, thank you so much again for joining us. And again, with the Twitter, I actually learned today that's not Inside Pack Sports. I always thought it was actually the Twitter account was Inside Pack Sports, but that's good to know now that's Inside Pack Sport. So make sure, again, if you are already following them, Wolfpack Nation, make sure to check them out for all kinds of great NC State football and athletics and general coverage. Make sure to do that. So, but thank you, Ryan and Ken, again. Really do appreciate y'all's time. And, with that being said, make sure, again, if you haven't already from our side, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, give this video a like, and give us a follow. Tuffy Talk now on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you all so much for your time. And always, we'll see y'all Saturday night. Go Pack, baby.